Hopefully the exposure isn't terrible. I don't know, hold on, let me see. I'm gonna do something very silly. Um, I'm using just like the bare camera right now, built-in microphone and everything. I'm in my room, um, and right now I have it set on the standing desk instead of a tripod. So I decided to raise the standing desk up and use that as my tripod. Um, and then it doesn't seem like it's having an easy time figuring out how to use the exposure. Um, the light I have here is kind of too bright for it. I've been like experimenting with shutter priority mode instead of um, I don't even know what the other one that I usually use is. I usually use manual mode. That's what it is. And so I'm experimenting with shutter priority mode, and I'm like obsessing with my hair right now because I don't like how it's just doing this whole thing here. But anyways, hopefully it's not that bad. So in this video, I want to go over how I'm a little upset with old technology and kind of the inability to find a use for it anymore. So right here, I've got an iPad Mini. It's the very first one. I think it came out in like 2014. This is my iPad like all the way back in elementary school. I used it from like, I don't know, the third grade until the fifth or sixth or something like that before I got my own phone. My very first phone, like proper, um, with an SD card, or not an SD card, a SIM card, might be an iPhone 5. My very first like smartphone, just in general, I think would have been an iPhone 4S or something, which I somehow lost in the car or something. I don't know. I had it. I used it like an iPod pretty much because I didn't have a phone line yet. But I ended up losing it somehow, and then I eventually had like an iPhone 5S, I think, and I still have it. It's in. I'll show you in a bit. But then my first, I guess, proper phone or whatever that like worked and all that stuff. There was no problems with it. It wasn't just like a smaller version of what the iPad was for me. Would have been the iPhone 6, like the original iPhone 6. And then I had that for quite a while before getting an iPhone 7, and that was my phone for years. I think I had my iPhone 7 well into high school. And, I would have kept on using it had it not basically broken on me. Or actually, yeah, what happened was the charging port got loose, and the fix for, or the replacement rather, for a charging port is kind of a lot. Like, you have to take the whole phone apart for the most part. Like, you have to take the phone apart, of course. You have to take all the stuff out, and then once you finally get, the openness to be able to basically swap out the port in of itself, the charger port, you have to reassemble the phone. And so I was just like, I'm not doing that. So I ended up getting like an iPhone SE, the second one that came out in like 2020. So the one that's like based off of I think the iPhone 8 or something, or the 10 or something. I don't remember specifically. It's newer than the 7 in terms of what it was, because the 7 was still using like the aluminum back or whatever. And then after that, we had like the glass back phones with the 10R and the 10, and I think the iPhone 8 and all those things. I think the iPhone 8 had a glass back. I'm not sure. That's the phone that I skipped, and I skipped the I skipped the 10. I skipped the 8. I skipped the 11. I skipped the 12, and right now my current phone is the iPhone 13, which is crazy because we're on the iPhone 16. So, the newest phone I've ever had is the iPhone 13. And so I actually really like this phone a lot. It needs a new battery, but even then, like probably my favorite phone I've had right after the iPhone 7, maybe. And with all that said, I've tried balancing all these older devices that I have, and it's not really easy to do. Trying to like find a use for it, apart from like dedicated apps or experiences. Like I tried using my iPhone 6s Plus that I had laying around. I'll go show you that actually. While I'm at it, I'll actually show you this old iPod that we have. It's from like 2007. I think it's the fourth gen or the seventh gen. I think Nano or something. I forget the exact name. I don't know if it's on there, but it's like 4 GB. It's a very small iPod. The battery is basically toast. Like it doesn't really hold the charge anymore. I think you can make changes. I don't know if you can mod these. I think you might be able to replace the battery at the very least, but it's probably too much work for something this size or whatever. So, and 4 GB is pretty low. Like I recently switched from lossless on Apple Music back down to I think lossy or whatever it's called, like just the standard, the default or whatever. It's like 256 kilobits per second or something versus the whole ALAC 41 kilohertz or whatever the naming for it is. I'm pretty sure it's like CD quality. I pretty much downgraded from CD quality back to, I guess, a high MP3. I have to check right now. Actually, I'm not sure because I was on Spotify for a long time, and I experimented with like hi-fi streaming services and all those things. And if you have the right setup and the ears for it, you can notice the difference. But sometimes you have to like really lock in. And so I think generally, if you're just casually listening to music, it's not that big of a deal. I still very much prefer the idea of like CD quality though, because that was kind of like the norm for a while. After we moved from analog over to digital music, and then streaming became a thing, and so now we have MP3s, and so I don't know. I feel like CD quality is sort of where it should have stayed, but it is a lot of storage. Like my library shrank from like 15 plus gigabytes down to like just under 4. So nothing changed in terms of the size. It's or the volume of the music. It's the same amount of music that I had before and after. It's just, it's compressed now. And so, I basically shrunk my music down 5 times. So that's pretty crazy. And I only did that because I was evaluating the setup that I was listening with, which was pretty much this. I was using the wired Apple earbuds. And when I'm not using those, I'm using the AirPods Pro. So the only time I remember using like my studio headphones and stuff is when I'm plugged into my computer, because it's just kind of too much to be carrying around with, even with the dongle with my like regular phone. I'm starting to consider getting the M50Xs from Audio Technica just because it's been so long since I've really like looked into studio headphones. I've only been using my DT7070s or 770s, the Pros. I think it's like 80 ohms. And then when I'm like gaming, I'm using my wireless headset if I want to have the freedom in my bedroom, or I'll actually use my earbuds with my audio interface, and so I actually prefer that setup even more just because it's more minimal. But sometimes the headset's where I go. And with all that said, I pretty much switched over to MP3 again because using this setup, even with the dongle, I tried like NPR's like online like music test thing where like you listen to the songs, it'll show you like the worst quality, medium quality, and then like uncompressed or whatever. And there were some songs where I could tell, but it wasn't enough for me to be like, oh, I would be willing to download a full gigabyte of music when it's it could be like less than a gigabyte, right? So I just switched back to MP3, and I mean pretty much because of that. I'm okay with going back to Spotify. I think I have to check again. Like I said, I haven't really checked, but I'm pretty sure Spotify. And my desk is standing right now, so I'm gonna look like this right now. I'm pretty sure the Spotify MP3 quality is the same as the Apple Music MP3 quality. I could be wrong. Let me see. So it says the very high download for Spotify is 320 kilobits per second, whereas with Apple Music, I think it's actually less than that. So that's interesting. Let me see. Because I'm pretty sure Apple Music it's like 256. Wow, yeah. So for Apple Music, it's 256, which I mean technically means the library is smaller, I guess. But I mean, we're already stooping down to MP3. Might as well get the best MP3 can offer realistically, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'll switch back to Spotify at some point. But even then, I've heard that like the file format or whatever that Apple Music uses is technically better. And I mean, that's like the whole thing with the iPods from back in the day. And for a while, I was actually contemplating getting a dedicated iPod and like modding it or getting one that's already refurbished. But I mean, back to the phones, right? I was using this iPhone 6s Plus for the last like 2 weeks, primarily for reading manga and watching anime episodes when I don't want to use my computer. And it was a decent experience. It's not a bad one. I can say though, 2 years ago I tried doing that on this, and it was kind of doable. But now I can say it's not. I don't know if it's because websites are getting more demanding or if this thing's getting older or something like that. I'm not so sure. But it's pretty much like not really. You can do it, but it's not fun. You kind of have to. I probably shouldn't talk about that. But point is that the experience could be better if this is like maybe the second gen mini instead of the first gen mini. I don't know. But that has me contemplating a whole slew of things because these two have headphone jacks. I wanted to actually go back to this thing as like a dedicated like reader and player just because it had the headphone jack, and it only has 16 gigabytes. And these old phones, that was the lowest it would go, 16 gigabytes, and like half of the phone is already the operating system. So when my music library before converting it back to MP3 was 15 gigabytes, and obviously that's not doable. But now that it's 4 gigabytes, just about, I could technically do that and make this my dedicated listening phone, but I do plan on growing my library some more in terms of downloaded music, so probably not going to last very long with this thing. So that kind of leaves me in a spot where I'm looking for a replacement. And I've considered dedicated, minimalism, right? Where I have like a dedicated music device. I might get like an actual e-reader. I was looking into the Books Palma, or I might get an entirely new, different phone that's even newer, right? And so I guess to show you like the options that I have going for myself, we've got the iPod solution for music, and then we have the Books Palma for like an e-reader, right? So I can like read things and download things to it to read. I can even use that as a music player, right? So that thing comes with like 128 gigabytes of storage. So if I really wanted to, I could just combine both devices into one thing, and so I'm still detached from the phone. And the reason that this is kind of important to me now is because after having used cassettes a while ago, I'll show you. I have a Walkman. This is kind of too expensive to use as a dedicated player. Like, I wouldn't actually switch this entirely, and also it's just not convenient carrying cassettes around, even though it's a nice experience to do now and then. For a time, I did kind of use this. I tried taking it outside with me, and like I would carry like 2 tapes with me, and like that would last me like generally the whole day. I would ideally carry like 3 or 4, but with all that said, like this is not very practical anymore, unfortunately. But it is still very nice to like know that when I listen to music on here, number one, the music is like physically in my possession and not just like a digital file downloaded onto a physical or digital device. And also like it's offline completely. Like that was recorded 40 something years ago onto a physical medium, and it is analog. When I put it in here, it makes noise and it plays into my ears and it sounds great. So there's something very charming about that, but it's not practical because unfortunately, unless you're like buying the secondhand in person for like less than $1 each, like the cassette tapes, the albums, or if you're like buying them yourself and then like have a whole deck system to like record your music onto there, which again, I don't know the legal ramifications of talking about that sort of thing. It's not very practical. That's what we come back to. So this phone has 120 gigabytes of storage, and now that I shrink my music library, I can fit plenty more music onto it, but it still kind of sucks that everything's going to be on here. And also, I enjoy this phone for everything but maybe watching videos or reading. So I'm still kind of interested in either getting a bigger phone or getting a dedicated device to do those things. Because right now my current combo this week has kind of been just rocking these two. And the size difference, in all honesty, isn't even that crazy. Like the thing about the mini line of iPhones is that despite the smaller shell, there's still the smaller bezel, and so it's probably very close to the same. So I might just be kidding myself if I'm being honest. I'm not so sure. I could be wrong, but even then, it's when I'm looking at it side by side, the perceived difference when I really take a look at it isn't that much. So that really speaks to show you like how well the minis kind of did in terms of design, because this phone is basically no bezels, and then this phone has bezels on it, and you can see like the size difference, and that's why I really like the mini. But they're not making minis anymore because it's not really profitable. It's basically the same thing as the flagship model, but with a smaller battery and like $100 less. So they just totally stopped doing that, and I get it. The iPhone 16e is kind of a letdown. I feel like that could have been the mini/SE phone that we could have all wanted, where it's just a smaller phone with less features that you don't need from a flagship, but it's still, the best that Apple has to offer for that generation. And they could like refresh it every 2 to 3 years, and like it wouldn't be a big deal because every phone is like a year. And I mean, I guess the majority of the market's just people leasing their phones with their carriers and stuff like that, so it's whatever. But in terms of the phone that I'm considering to replace this, if I were to do like an all-in-one solution where this is my music player, my reader, whatever, right? Just have one device and stay that way, because I do have some amount of self-control. I don't really have to do the whole separate devices thing. But disregarding all that, if I were to get a new phone, it's probably going to be the Z Flip. That's what I'm looking into again. I was vaguely interested in it like a couple years ago, but it seems to have improved quite a lot, and I like the gimmick enough for like me to like want to own it, because this is kind of a gimmick in of itself too, where it's a flagship phone but it's small. Like that's how big it is, and it's very nice carrying this thing. Like my everyday carry is literally just a wallet, my AirPods, and my phone charger, and I got no problems with it. But it would be nice to have a bigger phone sometimes, and so I mean the Z Flip is kind of a small compromise with that, where it's like a smaller footprint just because you're flipping the phone down. It's like in a clamshell. I don't care about thickness. I really wish these modern devices, as powerful as they were, and how thin they are, it'd be awesome if they could just make them just slightly thicker and give us more. But so like my everyday carry just looks like this. My freaking wallet, got my keys in there, and pretty much that's all it is. So I'm looking into the Z Flip, and then still very disappointed that this iPad's too old now, and I don't really feel like getting into tablets just because I already have a laptop and a desktop, and I'm already like kind of searching alternatives for that. I've seen the lap decks is what they're called, where you can connect your phone with like USB-C or like these handhelds and all these things, and basically turn like basically the mobile computing experience back into the laptop experience. But you know, it's more of an accessory instead of like a forced experience, right? So like if I want to have my phone, but you know, I want to plug it in and like be able to use a keyboard and like a bigger screen and all those things, you can do that if your phone supports it or if your device supports it. And so hypothetically, I think the setup is just going to be the Z Flip or whatever phone I end up choosing, and then like the ROG Ally, and then one of those lap decks. That way, it's just like I have my phone, like the mobile thing, and I have like the mobile thing that's more powerful. That's basically a full-fledged computer, but I also have the option to use it as like a traditional laptop instead of the actual handheld. And you know, having basically experienced all of those things, I think it's very cool and very intriguing. So I really want to try that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. It's already pretty long, especially just because I'm like talking about tech and stuff. It's a lot of things to go over, and it's kind of like a choosing your loadout and like refining it, because I don't know, especially when you like go about changing it every once in a while, it keeps things interesting. You know, it's a hobby. So yeah, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. And then I totally forgot to mention like the very fact that I've even considered like a dedicated camera, and I basically have this one that I make my videos with right now, which is the CV1. You can see it right there. So, you know, I actually kind of like this thing. I kind of want to replace it with the RX100 though, just because I really want to have that viewfinder, and I like that like full body build, and I don't really need all like the fancy video features, because I'm generally going to be making my videos on my phone these days, or you know, at my desk like I was just now. So I don't really need all like the fancy features that the ZV-1 has, or even then, I'll just have both. I'll have like my dedicated stills camera and my dedicated video camera, because the ZV-1 is kind of like a camcorder, but in a point and shoots body. So that's the charm in that as well. I could make a whole other video about cameras as well. Maybe I will. So that's it. See ya.